Hey guys, welcome back. So today I brought home this Kubota generator, and as you can tell by looking at it, it's got some issues. Unfortunately, I don't know the history on this machine because someone threw it away. It was at the dump. On first sight though, this control panel caught my eye. Someone had disconnected it from the frame, and it's only being held in place by these wires. Also, the fuel tank bolts have been removed, and I think the worst of it is probably on this side. All these wires have been disconnected, and that's definitely an issue, but I don't think it's the issue that led to this machine being thrown away, because when I tried to pull over this Kubota engine, I found that the engine was stuck. So I don't know what led to this. If it was run out of oil, then it's probably terminal. But I don't know that. It could be something simple. So I'm going to start peeling some layers away and get to the bottom of what's going on with this engine. Worst case, we'll know why it failed. Potentially, I could get it running again. So let me get you set up a little bit better and get going on this. Plenty of oil, and it does not look to be watered down or diluted, so I give this one hope. That is rust on the spark plug, so somehow water or moisture got into the engine. And I'm guessing at this point, since it's not turning, either the rings are stuck or the valves are stuck. Not sure, but yeah, I would say water might have done this. So I'm actually gonna spray a bunch of PB Blaster in there, maybe some WD-40, and I'm gonna pull the recoil off. Just see if I can rock the engine and potentially get it to free up. Just an observation here, but the bolts that hold the engine to the mounts are missing on both sides, and it's the same on the other end where the stator mounts are. So I'm not sure why someone would remove those, but they are removed, and you can see the engine has already shifted out of place. So we'll add that to the list, assuming I can get this freed up. At least the engine's not seized, but it couldn't be much closer. It requires a lot of force to rotate that flywheel. And at this point, I think I have made at least one full revolution, and it has not gotten any easier to turn that engine. And at no point during that revolution was there an easy spot where the flywheel would spin freely. So that actually gives me a lot of information. I don't think it's a top-end issue based on that, because if it was something like a stuck valve, I could have backed that engine up and had it rotating freely, and that was not the case. Also, the piston and the cylinder, if there was an issue there, I would expect when the piston's at the top or the bottom of the travel that I'd be able to kind of rock the flywheel and have it move more easily. And I didn't sense that either. So I don't think it's a top-end issue. Most likely it's a bottom-end issue. I'm guessing the connecting rod. But let's give that PB Blaster some time to work its magic. Let it soak for maybe 48 hours on the off chance that something does free up. But I think this is going to be a teardown video. It's actually been over 2 weeks since I last worked on this machine. Now, I'm not expecting anything to be different, but I will give it a try. I'm going to put a wrench on the crankshaft again and see if there's any change. The engine has freed up quite a bit more. It's pretty easy to turn it over now with a wrench, and I can even turn it over with the drill. I don't think it's free enough yet that I can actually use the recoil to turn the engine over, but it's getting pretty close. So I'm going to get the compression tester hooked up. I want to try spinning it with the drill and see if we have any compression. Wow, we're at 60 PSI. That's pretty good. I think it's going to need another week or so soaking with the PB Blaster before it's ready to attempt to start. And assuming it does fully free up, the wiring does need to be sorted out. So at a minimum, right now, I'm going to reconnect that control panel, and I want to find which wire will trip this solenoid here to trigger the starter, because I do want to get a battery hooked up and see if this starter has enough power to turn the engine over as it is right now. the way the starter circuit usually works is that on the battery positive, you have two wires coming out. The heavier gauge wire goes straight to the starter, and the smaller gauge wire usually performs two functions. First, it sends power into the control panel, and when you turn the key to start, it passes that power through a wire to actuate the starter solenoid, which energizes the starter. And then once the engine's running, that usually doubles to charge the battery. Anyway, this is disconnected, but I do see in the back of the control panel there is a red wire, and most likely that goes to that. So I have the multimeter set up to test continuity. I'm going to connect one lead to this wire, and the wire harness coming out of the control panel doesn't have too many wires. You know, the hot 12 volts coming out of here is most likely going to be protected, so it's going to be red or yellow. The black is protected, at least on one of them, but that color is usually used for the coil. So if I had to guess, I would say it's the red wire. So put the other lead right here. And I'm just going to turn the key to start. And that's it. So this red wire goes most likely down here, which looks to be the starter solenoid. And then this wire here connects to there. And if I connect a battery, I should be able to crank the engine. So let's give that a try. Okay, good. That starter, it has enough power to crank the engine. So I'm going to add some more PB Blaster into the cylinder. I'll give it another week or so, and then move forward with this. All right, it's been another week, and after shutting the camera off, I did end up swapping out the PB Blaster with some seafoam. So I'm going to crank the engine over, just make sure it's out of the cylinder, and then I want to put a torque wrench on that crankshaft. I actually did that last week when the engine freed up, and it took 120 inch-pounds to rotate the engine, so I want to see if there's any improvement. Seems like there's no seafoam left. Must have snuck by the rings. All right, let's try 100 inch-pounds. Nope. $120. Yeah, 120. So nothing's really changed in the last week with the seafoam. And 120 inch-pounds, that's a lot of force, really, required to turn this. And it shouldn't be that high. So my concern is if I start it right now, the engine might not last very long. So I'm going to put some more PB Blaster in. We'll give it some more time. But before I do that, I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time taking a look at the spark. All the wires are disconnected. This is a CDI system. It needs to have the wires connected, the right wires. So let's take a look at that and see if we can't get spark to this engine. Haven't actually checked for spark yet, but with all the disconnected wires, I'm not expecting we're going to have any. But let's see. And we got nothing. So I would suspect that these wires here are the ones we need to connect in order to get this to fire correctly. Now, I did cheat. I took a look online. I wanted to find a service manual or a wiring diagram, and came up empty. Couldn't even find a user manual, but luckily, these seem to be color-coded. We've got an orange coming out of the coil and an orange right here. Got a brown and a brown. Looks like a white with a red stripe, which matches this one. And we've got two black wires coming out. So one of these is probably to kill spark, and the other one most likely is a ground for the coil in order to get spark. So we've got a black wire here and one here. Well, let's try it with these three wires connected, see what we get. And nothing. So I'm going to connect one of those black wires. We'll try it again. Nice. We got spark. So this is the black wire I connected, which brought spark back. Anyway, as far as killing spark, I have the ignition set to the off position, and this is the harness coming down from the control panel. And there's two black wires and a yellow wire. Now, not sure which black is for what. This one does have a white line on it, and then we have just another black wire here and one actually with a white line. So if I had to guess, I would say that goes there. But let's double check. I've got the multimeter set to test continuity. One lead is connected to the frame, so when it makes a connection to ground, we get a beep. So let's see if any of these are grounded out. And that's the only wire that's making a connection to ground, which that needs to be sent up to the control panel. So I am guessing it's one of these, and if I had to make a bet, I would say it is this one. So now let's see if we have a signal coming down. And we do. Let's try turning the switch on and see if it stops beeping. Yeah, and it does. The switch actually doesn't make a great connection. You kind of got to wiggle the key. So, okay, so that'll kill spark. And I assume it should go here. This is a black wire with a white line, which actually matches that. And that goes to the coil. And actually, we can test that real quick. If I connect this red to here, that's a connection right to ground. So if I crank the engine now, we should not get spark. Okay, good. And that grounded the coil out. So I think we're onto something here. So black with the white stripe goes there. Then we're just left with a yellow and a black. And it would seem like it would be the oil sensor. So this black wire here is a ground going into the switch. And the yellow wire would be when we have low oil. And the yellow wire actually goes up into the control panel. And there is a low oil light, which I assume that will light up. So that is pretty much set. I think my only question here is, what are these? Don't know. So we'll leave them there for now. Let's make sure we still have spark. And we do. Good. This is what I was thinking about here, the 12 volts output. So potentially that wire harness supplies power for that. But I forgot, this does have idle control. And this is all vacuum controlled, meaning this vacuum servo down here is what's connected to the governor. So when this activates, vacuum gets sent on this line and actuates this servo. But there has to be something electronic controlling that. So I followed the vacuum hoses, and actually this choke is vacuum controlled as well. They all come up here and go into what appears to be an electronic valve. There's actually 2 tabs right here, and this harness reaches up there just fine. So if I had to guess, those need to be connected to this valve, and then the wiring should be complete. I'd say we're getting pretty close. We got an engine that spins. We got compression. We got spark. I assume we have timing. You know, fuel's always an issue. So I'm going to get that carburetor off, get it up on the bench. We'll open it up and see what it looks like. Yeah, filter doesn't look too good. And this metal piece, I'm pretty sure is supposed to go on the other side. Yeah, surprisingly, it's not falling apart. So it's not in the best shape, but it is usable. Yeah, there's a lot going on up on top here. So I need to get this stuff off. Most of it is related to the choke, the automatic choke. So there's a couple screws here, and it looks like a bolt right there. And hopefully that'll just lift right off. I'm just going to leave this piece on. It's not important that I get it off. It is removable, but I don't think it's worth it. The ultrasonic should not harm this. I just really wanted to get that servo out of there. Yeah, that's clogged. Solid. That's the main jet, so this definitely would not have run. Yeah, that's not coming off. So I'm going to soak it a bit first before trying that again. I believe the emulsion tube, though, should be removable on this one. All right, that's not going to come out. The emulsion tube, it's not stuck, but I think the main jet is blocking it. It's also blocking the float in the needle from coming out. So I'm going to have to leave that in there, which I don't like doing because the solution I use in the ultrasonic is not good for the needle. But don't have much of a choice. Let's try the pilot jet. Okay. And this one I'm just going to see where it's set at right now before taking it out. That's 1 turn. 1.5 turns. This came out really well. Almost looks like new. I also got the main jet out, and I really had no choice. I tested the function of the needle and seat, and it wasn't holding. So the needle had to come out, and I did have to use excessive force. And thankfully, this came out, because if it hadn't, I'd be in trouble. There is no clone option for this carburetor. Thankfully, Kubota does sell the OEM part. Unfortunately, it costs $587.37, and that does not include tax and shipping. So that would have sunk this ship pretty quick and exceeds the value of that generator by at least double. Anyway, I've had this soaking in a bit of WD-40, trying to bring this needle back. It does have a ridge around it, and it had a little bit of scale. So I'm going to get this out. We'll give it a try and see if it's going to work. I'm not sure. It's actually pretty good, but I think I hear just a bit coming out of there. So I'm going to hook up the Mighty Vac and get a gauge on it, see how it's doing. Yeah, it's not holding. It's a little inconsistent. Sometimes it does hold, but not this time. Yeah, this needle, it's not holding. So we need a new one. I do have another one that I think is compatible with this, so we'll give that a try. I think this needle is a clone part. It is meant for a Mikuni carb, which I believe this is. They look about the same, so hopefully this one will work. It is dropping a little, but this carb's only designed for about half a PSI, so I will expect it to bleed off a bit, but it should stabilize around 2 or 3 PSI. Yeah, and we're good. It's staying at 3, so that should work. Okay. Well, it's 4 weeks later, and every day I've been spraying PB Blaster in there, rocking the engine just a little, hoping that it would free up a little bit more. Unfortunately, it hasn't. I just double checked the torque. It still requires 120 inch-pounds to rotate that flywheel. So I think it's as good as it's going to get. Is it enough? I don't know. I mean, these large flathead engines, they do require a lot more force to turn over than a more modern overhead valve version of a similar horsepower engine. So maybe it's okay, maybe it's not. The good news is Kubota does sell parts, so I could tear this thing down, find out for sure, and if it needs some parts, I could place an order. But it doesn't make sense. This is an old generator, and despite the name on it, Kubota, these don't fetch a lot of money. I did some research online, and used like this, they sell for anywhere between $60 and $250. And as I saw with the carburetor price, the parts for this generator are extremely expensive. And actually, this machine is worth more in parts than it is as a complete unit. Now, that doesn't mean I want to part this out, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that the way that it is right now, it will start and run, and that will let me evaluate what works on it and what doesn't, because if the engine fails, which it might, I at least know what I can part out and have confidence in selling to someone as a good part. But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. So I'm going to change the oil. I think there's a lot of PB Blaster in there at this point. Put some fresh stuff in, get the carb back on, and get this outside. Get it started and see what happens. Oil actually looks halfway decent. I mean, it's well-used oil, but there's no water in there. And more importantly, there's no bits of metal, no gray tint to that oil. So there's really no sign of an engine problem. I think the initial thought when I saw that spark plug may have been the right one. Moisture got in there. I saw rust on the plug. And that's probably what led to the engine being the way that it was. Anyway, the plug's been cleaned. We'll get that reinstalled and move on. That's pretty much it for now. I'm going to leave the airbox off. I did reconnect the vacuum line for the choke, and I also found 4 bolts. So I resecured the engine and the stator. So I think we're ready to go. Don't think my neighbors are going to like this one too much. I think it's going to be loud and most likely pretty smoky. I think a lot of PB Blaster made its way into the exhaust. So if it starts, it's most likely going to smoke. Now, I've got a lot of things on standby here because I don't know how long this is going to run, if it runs at all. So I've got 2 space heaters hooked up, ready to go. I've got a multimeter on the battery. I want to see if the charging system works. So we're starting at 12.54 volts, and I got this meter hooked up to the DC output on the panel. So let's get this started and see what it does. Well, it started and the engine sounded good, but it was running too fast. So potentially the governor is blown out on this. I'm not sure. So I'm going to restart it again. I actually didn't have the light turned on, so I want to see that that light comes on now that I have the switch turned on. And also, once it starts, I might be able to control this throttle manually, at least keep it under control and keep it running a little bit longer. all things considered, this is doing pretty well. The engine, it sounds good. The carburetor is running the engine very well. And we have power, both on the AC side and the DC side. But that governor, it's not responding at all. You know, at no point did I feel that governor trying to push the throttle plate closed. So either it's broken internally or maybe out of adjustment. So I'm going to loosen that nut, try making an adjustment, and see if that has any effect. To adjust the governor, you want to get your bearings first. This spring is pulling the arm in full open throttle. So in this position, it's idle. That position, it's full throttle. And what you want to do is just take note of that position. Counterclockwise is full throttle. So I should loosen this nut and then rotate this counterclockwise to recalibrate the governor. And it's already loose. That is good news. So the governor isn't actually broken. All right, let's give that a try. I am almost speechless on this one. I was not expecting this to run like it is. You know, when I got this, the engine was stuck. All the wiring, for the most part, disconnected and missing hardware, including engine bolts and stator mounting bolts. And apparently someone loosened up the governor arm. But this thing is 100%. I mean, it supported a 3,000 watt load, no issues. It was charging the battery, and it had DC output on the front panel. Not to mention, the idle control works. The engine, it sounds great. The smoking stopped, and more importantly, the engine, it has freed up. I mean, this is exactly how it should feel. So I think this is a survivor. So I'm going to get this back inside, finish putting it together, and I want to get it back out for an extended test. As far as the battery goes, this one I'm sure is overkill for this generator, but it is the only one I have with the correct terminals, and this one actually was free to me. Someone had dumped it in a parking lot, so I brought it home, and it took and held a charge just fine. That was months ago, so I'm going to leave this here, but I don't have the original hardware to mount this properly in the generator, but I do have a couple of J-hooks. These were from the NEC generator that didn't make it, and they're just long enough. So I cut up a piece of angle aluminum and put some holes in it, and that'll be used to strap it down. But I don't want to put it so close to these terminals, so I'm just going to rotate the battery 180 degrees and tighten it down. This generator isn't actually attached to that furniture dolly, so I do want to correct that. But before doing that, this dolly, it's in pretty bad shape. The wheels actually barely turn. So I'm going to swap that out for a slightly newer model. I've been trying to figure out who makes this engine. You would think it's Kubota. They're well known for their engines, but the engines they make are diesel engines. And I was walking through a friend's shop the other day, and he had a home light generator in the corner of his shop. And it was a smaller unit. I think it was 1400 watts, but it looked identical to this one. So, I don't think Kubota would have rebranded it and allowed Homelight to sell it. Most likely both Kubota and Homelight bought this from someone else. And my initial thought was that it was a Yamaha. I worked on an EF 6000 a couple years ago that is very similar in quality to this one. And also the starter recoil. It looks like a Yamaha recoil. This is a Yamaha one right here. But other engines have recoils like this, like the Robin engine, as well as Kawasaki, so I wasn't completely sure. And I think another clue is the carburetor. The carb that was on there, the $600 carb, the body matches this one exactly. And in fact, this one slides right onto these posts without issue. This came from a Yamaha MZ360, and they have clones of this for like 30 or 40 bucks. Would be a good option maybe for this engine, except for the fact the throttle plate on this one closes opposite the way it needs to be on this engine, unfortunately. And I think the thing that kind of sealed the deal was the starter over here. When I was editing the video, I noticed a little logo right there in the starter. That is the Yamaha logo. So I just did a Google search, old Yamaha generators, and one of the first ones that came up was a Yamaha EF 5000 DVE. And that one looks identical to this one. So this is, in fact, a rebranded Yamaha EF 5000 DVE. Up until now, everything you've watched was filmed back in March. It was quite cold, and at the time I decided to wait a couple months for things to warm up before bringing this outside for the final extended test. Well, 2 months has now turned into 6. It's now pretty much the end of the summer, and I was just finally getting around to bringing this outside. So I was just doing the final prep work. I tested the battery. The battery's dead, and it won't take a charge. So that's not too surprising since I found that in a parking lot. So we do need a new one of those. And then there's the tank. I mean, the tank from the outside, it is rusted, and I thought I looked in the tank and determined it was in good condition, but I don't think I did that. I think I got sidetracked on the fact that the engine was stuck and the wiring was all disconnected, because I just took that cap off, about to put fuel in the tank, and what I saw was a little bit concerning because the tank is actually in very bad shape. You can see there's a lot of junk down there and rust. So yeah, this tank, it's an issue. And an even bigger issue is the fact that if I wanted to buy a new one of these tanks, they're about $400. And buying a Honda clone tank is not an option because dimensionally, this is smaller. And the bottom of the tank, it's actually cut in such a way that it fits onto this generator properly. A Honda tank would not do that. And I couldn't buy one even if I wanted to because that is a discontinued tank. So hopefully it cleans up. Otherwise, I'm going to have to look at some other options because this generator, even up and running, it's not going to sell for much more than $150. So I don't really have a lot of options here as far as, buying an external tank and a fuel pump or converting this to propane. I mean, both of those things are possible, but it'll cost more than this generator is worth. So I'm going to try to clean this up the best I can, at least get it usable, and hopefully that works out. So I'm going to use some degreaser and some nuts and bolts. We'll put it in there, shake it around, try to get all the junk off the bottom of the tank, and then I might fill it with water, just see if there's any pinhole leaks. And if that all looks good, I'm going to use some Evaporust to clean up that rust. Now, the good news about Evaporust is that it will not harm metal. It only eats rust. But if that tank doesn't have good metal on it, then it will end up eating a hole in that tank. But I'm not sure I have much of a choice here. So let's get the tank outside. We'll put some degreaser in it and start cleaning it out. Anyway, you get the idea. It's cleaning up pretty well. Most of the sludge is off the bottom of the tank. So I'm going to keep doing this because the water is still coming out dirty after I shake it around, but you can kind of get an idea of what was in there. That is 5 gallons of very dirty water. So do this a few more times until the water comes out clear, and then move on to that Evaporust. Ah. That's pretty much it. Just got to hurry up and wait. So I'm going to leave it out here in the sun for the day. It might take a couple days to clean up, but right now it's only in the lower compartment. At some point I do need to tip it to get up over there, and maybe the sides as well. But yeah, we'll just give it some time and it should clean up pretty well. So I think that's about it. Haven't seen much additional progress overnight, and we're now at the 24-hour mark. So I'm going to get the Evaporust out, mop up the bottom of the tank a bit, and run a little bit of fresh fuel in there to get the remaining Evaporust out. And then I'm going to put some ethanol-free fuel in the tank right away to keep it from flash rusting. Despite what I just said, I think I am going to put some water through the system and a few nuts and bolts and shake it around, because the black stuff coming out, that is from the Evaporust, that is the converted rust. And I want to, again, get it clean flowing before trying to use this on the generator. Luckily, this has a really big filter that's in good condition, so if there are any little bits left, they're not going to make it through that filter. I nearly filled the tank with ethanol-free fuel. So I'm going to let this sit for a few days, let the Evaporust and remaining water kind of work its way down to the bottom. And I'll just drain it, filter it, take any water out of the fuel, and then put the good stuff back in. So while I'm waiting for that to kind of percolate, I did pick up a new battery. My intention was to get a similar battery as what I had in there, but those batteries are a surprising amount of money. They were about $200 at the few auto stores I checked out. So instead of the Post-style battery, I ended up getting a tractor battery. That was about 50 bucks, and I think it should crank the engine without issue. So let's get that mounted up and give that a try. Yeah, it's not looking too good. The bracket I made earlier for that other battery does not really fit. I could cut it down some, but the J-hooks, the threads actually end way up here, so that's not going to work. And I've since acquired a few of these large Velcro straps, which I think should work just fine in this case. Perfect. Got the fuel line reconnected and the tank reinstalled. So let's get it started, let it run for a bit, let the engine warm up, and I'll put a 3,000 watt load on it. We'll just let it run like that for about an hour and make sure everything's good. It's been running for half an hour without any issues, but I almost forgot. This generator, it is a brushless generator, and when looking at the parts diagram, the design looked very different than what I normally see. It looked more textbook, so I'm going to get out the oscilloscope, we'll hook it up, and just take a quick look at the waveform, see if it's any cleaner than the brushless generators I usually see. So right now we're at no load, and it's dirty, but not nearly as bad as I see. Let's load it up, see if it changes at all. Yeah, not much better. I would say actually worse. That looks pretty bad, but it is brushless. That's what you get. Well guys, that's pretty much it. I mean, this one I didn't give much of a chance. The engine was quite stuck, and against all odds, it became unstuck. We had compression, we got spark after reconnecting all those wires, and this thing started right up and raced out of control. So thankfully, it was just a loose governor arm on that governor shaft, and then we got control of the engine speed just to find out the tank is in pretty bad shape. And of course, parts for this are ridiculously expensive. So all those things, for all those reasons, I didn't think this one had much of a chance. I was convinced it was going to be a teardown video, but this one, it is definitely a survivor. So I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.